In the intricate and often turbulent world of Norse mythology, there exists a figure who defies easy categorization, a being of dazzling intellect, silver-tongued eloquence, and a moral compass that seems to spin with infuriating unpredictability. This is Loki, a name that resonates with trickery, transformation, and ultimately profound tragedy. He is not an Aesir by birth, yet he walks among them, an insider and an outsider simultaneously, his actions serving as both a catalyst for some of their greatest triumphs and the direct cause of their deepest sorrows. To understand Loki is to grapple with the very nature of chaos and order, creation and destruction, loyalty and betrayal, for he embodies these dualities with an unnerving and captivating complexity. His journey through the myths is a gradual yet inexorable descent from a mischievous, often helpful companion of the gods to the architect of their despair and a key antagonist in the final, world-shattering conflagration of Ragnarok. Welcome to the Purple Files. If you enjoy our videos, please consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get right into it. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our first 2 videos in this series, where we laid the foundations and explored other crucial figures and tales from these rich traditions. Link in the description below. Our exploration of this master of machinations begins with his full genealogy, which immediately sets him apart from the Aesir gods with whom he so closely associates. Loki's parentage is rooted firmly in the realm of the Jotnar, the giants, the traditional adversaries of the Aesir. His father was the Jotun Farbalti, a name that translates to cruel striker or dangerous hitter. This paternal lineage firmly establishes Loki's connection to the raw, often destructive forces of Jotunheim. Some poetic interpretations even suggest a cosmic birth, where Farbaldi, as lightning, strikes Laufey, representing leaves or trees, to bring forth Loki, the fire, a volatile and untamable element. Loki's mother is named as Laufey, or sometimes Nal. The name Laufey, meaning leafy isle or tree island, often evokes images of slender, perhaps delicate trees. Nal, on the other hand, means needle, suggesting something thin, sharp, and perhaps piercing. While Snorri Sturluson gives both names, the Eddic poems frequently refer to Loki with the matronymic Laufeyarson, the son of Laufey. This emphasis on his maternal line is unusual in the patriarchal context of Norse society and may suggest that Laufey was a figure of considerable status, or that it served to further highlight Loki's non-Aesir origins. Her precise nature, whether a Jotun-like Farbatu or perhaps a more obscure type of goddess or nature spirit, remains a subject of scholarly discussion. But her connection to the natural, perhaps wilder aspects of the cosmos is clear. Loki also had brothers, though they are far more obscure figures in the surviving myths. Helblindi, whose name eerily means Hellblinder or Deathblinder, a title also sometimes used as a Hati or descriptive name for Odin himself, creating a strange and unsettling resonance between the Allfather and Loki's kin. Another brother was Bylest, or possibly Baileipta, a name that might signify storm lightning or dwelling lightning. The Jotun nature of these siblings further underscores that Loki's familial ties lay firmly outside the divine halls of Asgard. Despite this lineage, Loki lived among the Aesir, his presence and initial acceptance largely explained by one of the most significant and sacred bonds in Norse culture, his blood-brotherhood with Odin. This solemn oath is explicitly invoked by Loki himself during the venomous exchange of the Lokasennan. Facing expulsion from Aegir's feast, Loki reminds the Allfather, "Mantu that Odin, viti adaga blendurum blodis saman. Olvi bergdiathu aldregi, nema okrevari barum borit." Do you remember, Odin, when in bygone days we two blended blood together, you vowed you would never taste ale unless it were brought to us both? The ritual of blending blood was one of an unbreakable pact, making the participants sworn brothers, bound by duties of mutual support, unwavering loyalty, protection, and vengeance if one were harmed. This sacred bond between Odin, the king of the Aesirs, and Loki, the son of giants, is crucial for understanding Loki's privileged and often perplexing position within Asgard. It likely explains why Odin tolerated Loki's disruptive behavior, his often dangerous pranks, and his morally ambiguous actions for so long. It granted Loki a protected status, an access to the inner circles of the gods that his Jotun heritage would otherwise have denied him. Odin, for his part, also upheld his side of the oath, at least for a considerable time. This strange alliance also speaks volumes about Odin's own complex character, his willingness to engage with chaotic, unpredictable elements, perhaps valuing Loki's undeniable cunning, his ability to solve problems often of his own making, or the very change and upheaval that Loki often brought in his wake. However, even this most sacred of bonds has its limits, and Loki's escalating transgressions, culminating in his role in Baldr's death and his vitriolic attack on all the gods in the Lokasena, would eventually shatter this brotherhood, leading to his terrible punishment. One of Loki's most defining characteristics, and a primary tool in his arsenal of trickery and manipulation, was his extraordinary ability of shapeshifting. This power to alter his physical form at will reflects his fluid, amoral, and fundamentally unpredictable nature. He employed it for a myriad of purposes, for deception, for escape, for infiltration, to achieve his goals, or simply to cause chaos and amusement. The myths are replete with instances of his transformative skill. He famously transformed into a salmon in a desperate attempt to escape the wrath of the Aesir after his role in Baldr's death became undeniable. He hid in the rapids of Franangrisfors. But the gods, guided by Kvasir's wisdom in deciphering the pattern of a burnt net Loki had been weaving, fashioned their own net to catch him. After several attempts where Loki leapt over the net, Thor finally caught the slippery salmon firmly by its tail, and it is said that this is why salmon have their characteristic tapered shape towards the tail. Perhaps his most consequential transformation was when he took the form of a beautiful mare. This occurred during the construction of Asgard's great defensive wall by a master builder, a Jotun in disguise. The builder had wagered that he could complete the wall within a single winter, with the help of only his mighty stallion, Svadilfari, his price being the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freya. As the deadline loomed, and it became terrifyingly clear that the builder, thanks to Svadilfari's incredible strength in hauling stones, was about to succeed, the gods panicked and blamed Loki for initially advising them to accept the wager. Threatened with death, Loki promised to sabotage the builder's efforts. Just 3 days before the deadline, Loki transformed himself into a seductive mare in heat and pranced near Svadilfari. The stallion, overwhelmed by instinct, broke free from his harness and pursued the captivating mare deep into the woods. Without his horse, the builder could not complete the wall in time, thus losing the wager. Thor dispatched the enraged Jotun builder, and sometime later, Loki, still in mare form, gave birth to a remarkable grey, 8-legged foal, Sleipnir, who would become Odin's renowned steed, the swiftest of all horses. Loki also frequently adopted the form of a fly, usually a gadfly, to disrupt and annoy. Most notably, he used this disguise to interfere with the work of the dwarven brothers Brokkr and Sindri as they forged the treasures for the gods, including Mjolnir. By biting Brokkr at critical moments, Loki attempted to spoil their craftsmanship, succeeding only in causing Mjolnir's handle to be slightly short. He appeared as an old woman on several crucial occasions. It was in the guise of an elderly crone that he cunningly extracted from Frigg the secret of Baldr's one vulnerability, the mistletoe. And later it was as the unfeeling giantess Thok, meaning thanks, used ironically, that he refused to weep for Baldr's death, thereby preventing his return from hell and sealing the fate of the beloved god. The form of a hawk or falcon, or the use of Freya's magical falcon feather cloak, which granted the power of flight, was another of Loki's favoured disguises for reconnaissance or swift travel. He used it to fly to Jotunheim to discover who had stolen Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, in the events of Thrymsvitr. He also flew in hawk form to the giant Gjallarhorn's court, an adventure that led to his capture and his coerced oath to lure Thor into a trap. And it was likely in a borrowed feather skin that he searched for Idunn after her abduction by the giant Thiazi. In the complex tale of Andvari's treasure, often called the Otter's Ransom, Loki is instrumental in acquiring the cursed gold, after he, Odin, and Höðr inadvertently kill Ullr, who was Hreidmar's son and often took the form of an otter. Hreidmar demands a huge ransom. Loki is sent to procure the gold and captures the dwarf Andvari, who himself had taken the form of a pike, a type of fish, hiding in a pool. Loki forces Andvari to give up all his treasure, including the fateful ring Andvaranort, which Andvari curses. While not a full bodily transformation, Loki also disguised himself as a handmaiden to accompany Thor, who was dressed as Freya, on their mission to retrieve Mjolnir from the giant Thrym, his quick wit in this role repeatedly saving their precarious deception. Loki's shapeshifting was far more than a mere party trick. It was a fundamental expression of his being. It allowed him to transcend boundaries, to infiltrate any domain, to manipulate situations from within, and to embody an inherent ambiguity. This fluidity of form also connected him to the practice of Sieda, a potent form of magic, and his transformations, particularly into female forms and giving birth as a mare, were often cited by his detractors like Odin in the Lokasenna as evidence of his urgy or unmanly nature, further complicating his status among the warrior ethos of the Aesir. The offspring of Loki are as notorious and pivotal to the Norse mythological narrative as Loki himself. His children, particularly those born from his union with the giantess Angrboda, are not merely characters but formidable forces of nature, destined to play catastrophic roles in the events of Ragnarok, with the Jotun Angrboda, whose name chillingly means anguish-boding, or she who brings grief. Loki fathered 3 monstrous and terrifying beings in the dark forests of Jarnvidr in Jotunheim. The gods had dire prophecies concerning these children, foreseeing that they would bring immense misfortune and sorrow. First among them was Fenrir, also known as the Fenrisulfa or Fenris wolf. Fenrir was a creature of insatiable hunger and terrifying ferocity who grew at an alarming and unnatural rate. The prophecies foretold that Fenrir was destined to slay Odin himself during the final battle of Ragnarok. Initially, the gods attempted to raise Fenrir in Asgard, but his rapid growth and increasingly menacing nature filled them with dread. So much so that only the brave god Tyr dared to approach and feed him. Recognizing the immense threat he posed, the gods resolved to bind Fenrir, a task that would prove incredibly difficult and would come at a great personal cost to Tyr, a saga we shall explore in detail when we focus on that god. The second child of Loki and Angrboda was Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, or world serpent, also called Midgardsormr. This colossal serpent was deemed so dangerous that Odin cast him into the vast ocean that encircles Midgard, the world of mortals. There, Jormungandr grew to such an unfathomable size that he could encompass the entire earth. With his head eventually meeting and biting his own tail, he became the eternal adversary of Thor, and their fated encounters, including Thor's famous fishing expedition and their mutual destruction at Ragnarok, are cornerstones of Norse eschatology. The third and final offspring of Loki and Angrboda was Hel, or Hela. When the gods discovered her, Odin cast her down into the misty depths of Niflheim and granted her authority over one of the realms of the dead, specifically the domain that would bear her name, Hel, or Helheimr. This was the afterlife for those who did not die gloriously in battle, those who succumbed to sickness, old age, or other ignoble end. Hel herself was a grim and foreboding figure. Her appearance was said to be half that of a beautiful woman and half that of a decaying corpse, or sometimes described as being half black or blue and half normal flesh-colored, her expression perpetually downcast and sorrowful. Her great hall in Helheimr was named Eljudnir, meaning sleet-cold or damp with sleet. Her existence was one of bleak dominion, with her dish named Hunger, her knife Famine, her manservant Ganglati, Tardy, or Lady Walker. her maidservant Ganglerti, or tardy trotter, her threshold stumbling block, her bed, sick bed, and her bed curtains gleaming baleful. Hel played a crucial role in the aftermath of Baldr's death, as it was she who decreed the terms for his possible return from the dead, that all things, living and unliving, must weep for him, a condition ultimately thwarted by Loki in disguise. While these three monstrous children with Angrboda are his most infamous, Loki also had children with his Aesir wife, Sigyn. Sigyn's name is thought to mean victorious girlfriend or friend of victory, and she is known above all for her extraordinary and unwavering loyalty to Loki, particularly during his agonizing punishment. With Sigyn, Loki fathered two sons, Nafi, also sometimes called Nari, and Váli, a name shared confusingly with one of Odin's sons who avenged. The fate of these sons was tragic and directly tied to Loki's eventual capture and punishment by the enraged Aesir. After Loki was apprehended, the gods in their fury transformed his son Váli into a ravenous wolf. In this monstrous form, Váli attacked and tore his own brother Nafi to pieces. Nafi's entrails were then magically transformed into unbreakable iron fetters, which the gods used to bind Loki deep within a cave. This horrific end for their children underscores the depth of the gods' wrath and the profound personal tragedy that befell Sigyn, who nonetheless remained by Loki's side. And then there is the unique instance of Loki himself becoming a mother. As previously mentioned, to prevent the Jotun master builder from completing Asgard's wall and claiming Freyja, the sun and the moon, Loki transformed himself into a beautiful mare. He successfully lured away the builder's mighty stallion, Svadilfari, causing the builder to fail his contract. Sometime after this escapade, Loki, still in his transformed state, gave birth to an exceptional grey foal with 8 legs, Sleipnir. This remarkable colt grew to become the finest of all horses, Odin's personal steed, capable of traveling with incredible speed over land, across the sea, through the air, and even into the shadowy realm of Hel. This episode, while showcasing Loki's problem-solving ingenuity and his mastery of shape-shifting, also carried significant social implications. For a male figure to give birth was considered profoundly ergi, or unmanly in Norse society, a fact that Loki's divine accusers, particularly Odin, would later throw back in his face during the scathing insults of the Lokasenna. Yet, it also provided the Allfather with his most prized and iconic mount. Another example of Loki's actions, however unorthodox or scandalous, often resulting in unexpected benefits for the Aesir, at least in the earlier phases of his mythological career. Loki's lineage and his extraordinary offspring firmly establish his connections to the forces of chaos, transformation, and the very entities that will bring about the downfall of the gods at Ragnarok. He is not merely a mischievous trickster, he is a progenitor of doom, a liminal figure whose very blood and actions blur the lines between the divine and the monstrous, the creative and the destructive. Now, let us delve into the detailed analysis of the many myths in which Loki is involved, for it is through these stories that his complex evolving nature is most vividly revealed. His interventions range from malicious pranks with unforeseen consequences to acts of genuine, if often self-serving, assistance to the Aesir, gradually shifting towards more sinister and irredeemable betrayal. We have already touched upon the incident of Sif's hair and Loki's role in the creation of key divine artifacts when discussing Thor and his hammer Mjolnir. From Loki's perspective, the shearing of Sif's golden locks was an act of pure, unmotivated malice, a prank taken too far, perhaps born of boredom or a desire to stir trouble. When confronted by Thor's earth-shattering rage, Loki's quick thinking and silver tongue were all that saved him from being broken bone. His terrified promise to procure even finer hair from the dwarves was a desperate ploy, but one that, through his subsequent cunning and instigation of a wager between two rival groups of dwarven smiths, the sons of Ivaldi and the brothers Sindri and Brokra, led to an astonishing outcome. Not only did Sif receive her magical, growing golden hair, but the gods also gained Odin's unerring spear Gungnir and his endlessly productive ring Draupnir, Freyja's wondrous ship Skidbladnir and his radiant boar Gullinbursti, and most crucially, Thor's mighty hammer Mjolnir. In this instance, Loki's mischief, though initially destructive and self-endangering, ultimately resulted in the Aesir acquiring their most precious treasures and defenses. This pattern of Loki causing a problem and then being forced, often under duress, to solve it in a way that benefits the gods, at least temporarily, is a recurring motif in his earlier myths. He is the agent of chaos who, inadvertently or through coercion, becomes an agent of beneficial change or acquisition. The myth of the abduction of the goddess Idunn and her life-sustaining apples of youth is a critical episode that showcases Loki's culpability when, under duress, the dire consequences of his actions for the entire Aesir community, and his indispensable, if reluctant, role in rectifying his own misdeeds. Idunn, the gentle wife of Bragi, the god of poetry, was the keeper of a sacred treasure, magical apples, which, when eaten by the gods, granted them perpetual youth and vitality. Without these apples, the Aesir would age and wither, just like mortals. The trouble began when Odin, Höðr, and Loki were on a journey. They had been traveling for a long time and were famished. Spotting a herd of oxen, they slaughtered one and prepared to roast it over a fire. However, no matter how long they cooked it, the meat simply would not roast. Perplexed, they heard a voice speaking from the branches of the oak tree above them. It was an enormous eagle, which claimed that it was responsible for the meat not cooking, and that if they would grant it a share of the feast, it would allow the fire to do its work. The gods, desperate with hunger, agreed. The eagle then swooped down and seized the best parts of the ox, both shoulders and both legs, leaving little for the three travelers. Loki, enraged by the eagle's greed, snatched up a long staff and lunged at the great bird, attempting to strike it. The eagle deftly caught the staff in its talons, and as it soared into the air, Loki found himself stuck fast to the other end of the staff, unable to let go. The eagle flew low, dragging the terrified Loki over rocks and through thorny bushes, his arms feeling as though they would be torn from their sockets. Loki screamed for mercy. The eagle, who was none other than the formidable Jotun Thiazi, in his magical feather skin, finally spoke. He declared that he would only release Loki if Loki swore a solemn oath to lure Idunn, along with her precious apples of youth, out of Asgard and into Thiazi's clutches. Loki, in agonizing pain and fearing for his life, had little choice but to swear the oath. Thiazi then released him, and Loki, battered and bruised, rejoined Odin and Höðr, saying nothing of the terrible promise he had been forced to make. Upon their return to Asgard, Loki set about fulfilling his treacherous oath. He approached Idunn and, with his characteristic cunning and persuasive words, told her that he had discovered some truly remarkable apples growing in a forest just outside Asgard, apples that he believed were even more wondrous than her own. He suggested that she should bring her own apples with her for comparison. Idunn, innocent and unsuspecting, was intrigued. She agreed to accompany Loki, taking her casket of apples with her. Loki led her out of Asgard's protective walls and into the appointed wood, where the giant Thurs, once again in his eagle form, was waiting. Thurs swooped down, seized the terrified Idunn and her apples, and carried them off to his desolate stronghold in Jotunheimr, a place called Thrymheimr, Thunder Home, or Noisy Home. With Idunn and her apples gone, a dire transformation began to sweep through Asgard. The gods, deprived of their source of eternal youth, started to age rapidly. Their skin wrinkled, their hair turned grey, their strength waned, and their divine radiance dimmed. They became old, frail, and filled with despair. An urgent council was convened to determine who was responsible for this calamity. It was soon discovered that Idunn had last been seen leaving Asgard in the company of Loki. For the gods seized Loki, their patience with his mischief now utterly exhausted by this catastrophic consequence. They threatened him with torture and a horrible death unless he could find a way to rescue Idunn and bring back the apples of youth. Loki, once again facing the dire wrath of the Aesir, promised to undertake the perilous mission. To do so, he borrowed Freya's magical falcon feather cloak, which allowed him to transform into a hawk and fly with incredible speed. In his hawk form, Loki soared to Jotunheimr, journeying to Thiazi's grim fortress of Thrymheimr. Fortunately for him, Thiazi was out at sea, fishing. Loki found Idunn alone and, using his magic, transformed her into a small nut, which he could easily carry in his talons. Clutching the nut tightly, he began his desperate flight back towards Asgard. However, Thiazi soon returned home, discovered Idunn missing, and immediately donned his eagle skin to give chase. The pursuit was furious. Thiazi, as a massive eagle, was incredibly swift and powerful, and he began to gain on Loki, who flew with all the speed his hawk form could muster. As they neared Asgard, the watching gods saw the two birds approaching, the small hawk being relentlessly pursued by the giant eagle. The Aesir quickly gathered all the wood shavings they could find and piled them high along the top of Asgard's walls. Just as the hawk shot over the ramparts and collapsed exhausted inside, the gods set fire to the pile of wood shavings. Thiazi, in his eagle form, unable to stop his momentum, flew straight into the towering wall of flames. His feathers caught fire and he plummeted to the ground inside Asgard, crippled and helpless. The gods, showing no mercy to their formidable enemy, fell upon him and killed him. Thus Idunn was rescued and her apples of youth were restored to the gods, who quickly regained their vitality and divine appearance. However, the consequences of Thiazi's death were not yet over. When Thiazi's daughter, the formidable Jotun Skadi, learned of her father's demise, she armed herself and journeyed to Asgard, demanding wergild, or compensation, for his killing. The gods, wishing to avoid further conflict, offered Skadi a settlement. Firstly, they allowed her to choose a husband from among the unmarried gods, but with the condition that she must make her choice by looking only at their feet. She chose the most beautiful pair of feet, believing them to belong to the handsome Baldr, but they actually belonged to the sea god Njordr, leading to a famously unhappy marriage. Secondly, the gods had to make Skadi laugh, a feat which seemed impossible given her grief and fury. It was Loki once again who accomplished this. In a display of rather crude and undignified antics, Loki tied one end of a cord to the beard of a goat and the other end to his own testicles. He and the goat then engaged in a ridiculous tug-of-war, each squealing and pulling until Loki finally fell into Skadi's lap. At this absurd spectacle, Skadi could not help but burst into laughter. As a final act of recompense, Odin took Thiazi's eyes and threw them into the heavens, where they became two bright stars. The myth of Idunn's apples is a pivotal one for Loki. It demonstrates his vulnerability to coercion by powerful Jotnar, forcing him into acts of betrayal against the Aesir. It underscores the absolute dependence of the gods on the apples for their immortality and youth, making Idunn a figure of immense importance. Crucially, it once again casts Loki in the dual role of problem causer and problem solver. He is directly responsible for Idunn's abduction, yet he is also the only one capable of her rescue. His actions, even when forced, have far-reaching consequences, leading not only to the temporary aging of the gods, but also to the death of a major Jotun, Thiazi, and the subsequent arrival of Skadi in Ugord, which in turn leads to her marriage with Njordord, and further entanglements between the Aesir and the giants. This story paints Loki as a complex instrument of fate, his trickery and resourcefulness essential to navigating the crises he himself often precipitates. We have already recounted Thor's journey to Utgarda-Loki in our exploration of Thor's myths. From Loki's perspective, his involvement in this adventure further highlights his role as Thor's frequent, if sometimes reluctant, companion. His primary contribution in Utgarda-Loki's hall was his participation in the eating contest against Loki. Loki, confident in his own ability to consume food rapidly, was soundly defeated when Loki devoured not only the meat, but also the bones and the wooden trough itself. The later revelation that Loki was, in fact, wildfire personified, served to underscore the nature of the illusions at play in Utgarda-Loki's stronghold. While Loki's failure was less cosmically significant than Thor's defeats against the ocean, the Midgard serpent, and old age, it nevertheless placed him in a position of being bested. a common theme for those who ventured into the deceptive realm of the Giant King. For Loki, who prided himself on his cleverness, being outwitted, even by elemental forces in disguise, must have been a galling experience, though he often served as the quick-witted interpreter or excuse-maker for Thor's more socially awkward moments during their travels. The most devastating and pivotal series of events in which Loki is implicated, marking his definitive turn from a mischievous ally to a malevolent adversary of the Aesir, is the lead-up to the death of Baldr the Beautiful. Baldr, the beloved son of Odin and Frigg, renowned for his radiance, purity, and gentleness, began to be plagued by terrible dreams foretelling his own demise. This filled all the gods with profound anxiety, for Baldr was universally cherished. Baldr's devoted mother undertook an extraordinary quest to protect her son. She travelled throughout all the 9 realms and extracted a solemn oath from every single thing, from fire and water, iron and all kinds of metal, stones, earths, trees, sicknesses, beasts, birds, poisons, and serpents, that they would not harm Baldr. So comprehensive were her efforts that Baldr became effectively invulnerable. The gods, relieved and delighted, made a sport of this newfound invincibility, gathering in their assemblies to hurl missiles at Baldr, darts, stones, axes, only to see everything turn aside without leaving so much as a scratch. All rejoiced in Baldr's safety, except for one. Loki. Loki, filled with envy at Baldr's popularity and perhaps driven by his increasingly antagonistic nature, could not bear to see this joyous state of affairs continue. He resolved to find a way to harm Baldr. Disguising himself as an old woman, Loki approached Frigg in her hall, Fenrir. With cunning questions and feigned concern, he inquired if all things had indeed sworn an oath not to harm Baldr. Frigg, unsuspecting and perhaps a little proud of her achievement, confided in the disguised Loki that there was one thing she had not bothered to take an oath from: a young, tender shoot of mistletoe growing west of Valhalla. She had deemed it too young and harmless to pose any threat. Armed with this fatal knowledge, Loki immediately went and found the mistletoe. He plucked the seemingly innocuous plant and returned to the place where the gods were making sport with Baldr's invulnerability. He noticed Höðr, Baldr's blind twin brother, standing apart from the games, unable to participate due to his lack of sight. Loki approached Höðr and asked why he too was not honoring Baldr by throwing something at him. Höðr replied that he could not see where Baldr stood, and besides he had no weapon. Loki, with feigned helpfulness, offered Höðr the mistletoe sprig, telling him it was but a slender twig and that he would guide Höðr's hand so that he too could join in honouring his brother. Höðr, innocent and unsuspecting of any malice, took the mistletoe. Loki then guided his arm, and Höðr threw the mistletoe dart directly at Baldr. The mistletoe, the one thing from which no oath had been taken, struck Baldr, and he fell down dead, his light extinguished. A silence of utter horror and disbelief fell upon the assembled gods. They were so stunned by grief and shock that they could not speak, nor could they immediately give vent to their rage, for the place of assembly was a sacred sanctuary where no blood could be shed. Their sorrow was immeasurable, the greatest grief ever to befall gods and men. Loki did not stop there. His malevolence extended to ensuring Baldr remained in the realm of Hell. When Hermod the Brave, Baldr's brother, undertook the perilous journey to Hell to bargain for Baldr's return, the goddess Hel agreed to release him, but only on the condition that all things in all the worlds, living and dead, must weep for him. To prove he was universally beloved, messengers were sent throughout the cosmos, and indeed all things wept: humans, animals, earth, stones, trees, and metals. But as the messengers were returning, their mission seemingly accomplished, they came upon a giantess sitting in a cave. She gave her name as Thok, which means thanks. When asked to weep for Baldr so that he might return from Hell, Thok callously replied, "Thok mun grata thurum tarum Baldr, Baldr brennu, kvix nad dods norka, ek kars sona, haldi helti vi es hefir, Baldi, helte vi es hefir, Baldi's funeral fare, alive or dead, I had no use for the old man's son. Let Hel hold what she has." It was universally believed that this cruel giantess was none other than Loki in another of his disguises. ensuring that his malicious deed would not be undone and sealing Baldr's fate in the gloomy realm of the dead until after Ragnarok. Loki's role in the death of Baldr was the ultimate transgression, an act of pure malice that shattered the peace of Asgard and irrevocably poisoned his relationship with the Aesir. It was the point of no return, transforming him from a troublesome trickster into the acknowledged enemy of the gods, and setting in motion the chain of events that would lead directly to his terrible punishment and the prophesied doom of Ragnarok. His actions here reveal a depth of jealousy, spite, and destructive intent that overshadows all his previous, more ambiguous deeds. The culmination of Loki's antagonism, the public and venomous severing of all ties with the Aesir, occurs in the scathing poetic exchange known as Lokasenna, or Loki's flighting, Loki's verbal contest or taunting. This poem details a feast held by the sea giant Aegir, to which many of the prominent gods and goddesses were invited. Loki, however, after committing a murder, forces his way in and proceeds to systematically insult and defame nearly every deity present, dredging up their deepest shames, hidden transgressions, and most painful memories. We shall explore this critical text, stanza by stanza, to understand the depth of Loki's bitterness and the nature of his accusations, which offer a unique, if biased, glimpse into the less savoury aspects of the Aesir. The feast is underway in Aegir's magnificent hall. Aegir had two capable servants, Fimafeng and Eldir. Loki, however, grew jealous of the praise being heaped upon Fimafeng for his skill in attending to the guests, and in a fit of pique, he killed Fimafeng. The gods, outraged by this murder within a sacred hall of peace, raised a great cry and drove Loki out of the feast and into the forest. But Loki, unrepentant and filled with a simmering rage, soon returned. He encountered Aegir's other servant, Eldir, outside the hall. Loki speaks, stanza 1, paraphrase. What are those warriors, sons of victory, discussing over their ale inside? Eldir replies. They speak of their weapons and their prowess in war, the sons of victory. Among all the Aesir and elves within, not one has a friendly word for you, Loki. Loki retorts. Stanza 3, paraphrased, I shall go into Aegir's hall to see this feast. Strife and hatred I shall bring to the Aesir's sons, and thus mix their mead with malice. Eldir wards. Know this, if you go into Aegir's hall to behold that feast, and if you splatter them with slander and spite, they will surely wipe it off on you. Loki dismisses him. Know this too, Eldir, if we two are to contend with venomous words, I shall be rich in replies if you speak too much. Loki then pushes past Eldir and enters the hall. Upon his entry, all the assembled gods fall silent, recognizing him. Loki breaks the silence, stanza 6, paraphrased. Thirsty I come, I, Loptus, Loki's other name, from a long journey, to this hall to ask the Aesir for one drink of the famous mead. Loki continues, addressing their silence. Stanza 7. Paraphrased and paraphrased, you swollen with pride, gods, that you cannot speak. Assign me a seat and a place at the feast, or bid me be gone. It is Bragi, the god of poetry and eloquence, husband of Idunn, who first responds to Loki's insolent demand. Bragi speaks, stanza 8. Paraphrased, the Aesir will never assign you at their feast, for the Aesir know well what men they should invite to their joyful banquet. Bragi stands for order and propriety, and Loki has violated both. Loki then invokes his most sacred tie, his blood brotherhood with the Allfather himself, directly addressing Odin. Loki speaks to Odin, stanza 9, paraphrased. Do you remember, Odin, when, in bygone days, we two blended blood together? You vowed you would never taste ale unless it were brought to us both. This is a powerful appeal, reminding Odin of an oath that should guarantee Loki hospitality. Odin, bound by this ancient oath, reluctantly concedes, but also foreshadows the involvement of his powerful son, Víðarr. Loki speaks stanza 10, paraphrased then Víðarr, Odin's silent son, destined to avenge him at Ragnarok. And let the wolf's father, Loki, sit at our feast, lest Loki speak words of blame to us here in Aegir's hall. Odin, even as he grants Loki a seat, subtly reminds him of the forces that will eventually be arrayed against him. Víðarr rises and pours Loki a drink. Before drinking, Loki offers a toast but deliberately excludes Bragi. Loki speaks, "Hail Aesir, goddesses, and hail all you most holy gods. All except that one Aesir, Bragi, who sits there on the bench." Bragi, insulted, attempts to placate Loki with gifts, perhaps hoping to avoid the inevitable verbal onslaught. Bragi speaks, stanza 12, paraphrased, and a sword as well. And Bragi will also give you an arm ring, lest you bear ill will towards the Aesir. Do not provoke the gods to wrath against you. Loki scorns Bragi's offer, immediately launching into a personal attack, accusing him of cowardice. Loki speaks to Bragi, stanza 13, paraphrase, "Of horses and arm rings you will always be lacking, Bragi. Of all the Aesir and elves here assembled, you are the most cowardly in battle and the most shy of a spear shot." Bragi retorts, stanza 14, paraphrased, "As I am now inside Aegir's hall, I would be holding your head in my hand as a reward for your lies." Bragi implies that only the sanctity of the feast hall prevents him from physically attacking Loki. Loki fires back, "You are brave in your seat, Bragi, the bench ornament, but you wouldn't be if you were truly angry. If you are so fierce, then fight." A brave man doesn't sit and ponder. Idunn, Bragi's wife, keeper of the apples of youth, intervenes, trying to protect her husband from Loki's venom. Idunn speaks, stanza 16, paraphrase, "I pray you, Bragi, consider our kinship and the wishes of all the children and adopted kin, and do not speak words of blame to Loki here in Aegir's hall." Loki immediately turns his spite on Idunn, accusing her of promiscuity and a shocking betrayal. Loki speaks to Idunn, stanza 17, paraphrased, "That of all women you are the most man-mad, since you laid your washed bright arms around your brother's slayer." This is a shocking accusation, implying Idunn embraced the killer of her own brother. The identity of this brother and his slayer is not clarified in any other surviving myth, making this a particularly obscure and damaging insult. Idunn responds with dignity, "I speak no words of blame to Loki here in Aegir's hall. I only sought to calm Bragi, heated with ale, lest you two fight in your fury." Gefjun, the goddess associated with virginity and ploughing, speaks next, trying to deflect Loki. Gefjun speaks, stanza 19, paraphrased, "Why must you two Aesir exchange words of spite here? Lopti is known for his mockery, and he cares little for the living or the gods." Loki then attacks Gefjun, alluding to a story where she supposedly prostituted herself for a jewel. Loki speaks to Gefjun, stanza 20, paraphrased, "I shall now recall how that fair young boy seduced you, who gave you a necklace and around whom you wrapped your thighs." This refers to a tale, perhaps known to the audience of the poem, but now lost, where Gefjun supposedly slept with a young man for a piece of jewelry. Odin himself now tries to intervene, warning Loki of the folly of his actions. Odin speaks, stanza 21, paraphrased, "To incur the wrath of Gefjun, the fate-knowing goddess, for she knows all the destinies of men, I believe, as well as I do myself." Loki, far from being intimidated, turns his attack directly on the All-Father, Odin, accusing him of unfairness in battle and of practicing Seda, a form of magic considered unmanly. Loki speaks to Odin, stanza 22, "You never knew how to apportion honor in war among men. Often you have given victory to those who did not deserve it, to the faint-hearted." This is a serious charge against Odin's role as Sigfoder, father of victory. "Even if I have given victory to those who didn't deserve it, you once lived beneath the earth for 8 winters, as a milkmaid and a woman, and there you bore children. That, I say, is the mark of an unmanly ergi nature." Odin refers to a lost myth where Loki supposedly lived as a woman and even bore children, a deep insult in their warrior culture. Loki fires back with a similar accusation, stanza 24, paraphrased, "Pactest Seda on Samsi land, and beat on the drum like a vulva. Seus, in the likeness of a wizard you journeyed among men. That, I say, is the mark of an unmanly ergi nature. Loki accuses Odin of practicing female magic, a charge that also appears in other sources and was considered shameful for a male god. Frigg, Odin's wife and queen of the Aesir, now steps in to defend her husband and chastise Loki. Frigg speaks, "Your deeds of old should not be spoken of here before men, what you two Aesir did in ancient days. Ever should past actions be hidden." Frigg appeals for discretion and an end to dredging up old shames. Loki immediately turns his venom on Frigg, accusing her of infidelity with Odin's own brothers. Loki speaks to Frigg, stanza 26, paraphrased, "You are Fyrgin's daughter, and have ever been eager for men. For both Vili and Veia, Odin's brothers, wife, let them lie in your embrace." This is a devastating accusation against the queen of Asgard. Frigg responds with a sorrowful warning, "If I had a son like Baldr here in Aegir's hall, you would not escape from the sons of the Aesir until you had been fiercely attacked." Frigg implies that if Baldr were alive, Loki would not dare speak so, and his punishment would be swift. Loki cruelly taunts Frigg with her role in Baldr's death. "Do you wish me now, Frigg, to recount more of my harmful deeds? I am the one who caused it, that you will never see Baldr ride back to your halls." Loki openly boasts of his responsibility for Baldr remaining in hell. This is the ultimate insult to Frigg, twisting the knife in her deepest wound. Freya, the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility, can no longer remain silent in the face of Loki's attacks on Frigg and his general malevolence. Freya speaks, stanza 29 paraphrased, "Frigg knows all fates, I believe, though she herself does not speak them." Freya defends Frigg's prophetic knowledge. Loki then launches a vicious attack on Freya, accusing her of incest and promiscuity with all the gods and elves. Loki speaks to Freya, "Be silent, Freya. I know you full well you are not free from blame. Of all the Aesir and elves who are gathered here within, each one has been your lover." He then specifically accuses her of sleeping with her own brother, Freya. Freya retorts, stanza 31, paraphrased, "Your tongue is false. It will, I foresee, sing you no good fortune. The Aesir too. Shamefaced you shall go home." Loki continues his attack on Freya. They say in Italian, "Be silent, Freya. You are a wicked witch and much imbued with evil. You were astride your brother when all the gods laughing surprised you, and then, Freya, you farted." This is a crude and deeply insulting accusation, combining sorcery, incest, and undignified behavior. Njordr, the Vanir god of the sea, father of Freya and Freyr, now speaks up, defending his daughter and highlighting the positive outcome of women bearing children, even if the father is Loki. Njordr speaks, stanza 33, paraphrased, "It is no great harm if a woman has a lover or a husband or both, but it is a marvel that this unmanly ergi, Aesir, Loki, has come in here, he who has borne children." Njordr turns Loki's earlier insult about bearing children back on him. Loki then mocks Njordr for his status as a former hostage from the Vanir to the Aesir, and for supposedly fathering children with his own sister. Loki speaks to Njordr. "Be silent, Njordr. You were sent from the east as a hostage to the gods. Hymir's daughters used you as a piss trough and pissed in your mouth." This is a vulgar insult, its origin unclear, he continues in stanza 35. "It was no great wonder that you, sent as a hostage from afar, begot such a son, Freya, when you did so with your own sister," referring to the Vanir practice of sibling marriage, which was not acceptable to the Aesir. Njordr defends himself and his son, stanza 36, paraphrased, "This is my comfort, though I was sent from afar as a hostage to the gods. I begot that son, Freya, whom no one hates, and who is considered a prince among the Aesir." Tyr, the one-handed god of war and justice, now intervenes, praising Freya's good nature. Meant, Your first name, Don Wender, profession, I do. But, much. Mate, honey, skunky. Professor Flim is, quote, John Perrin Strob, Standard Wilf, El Blada, Gile, Lord Frere, John Perrin Strar, unquote. Loki immediately attacks Tyr, mocking him for the loss of his hand to Fenrir, and accusing him of being unable to foster true peace or reconcile foes. He also alludes to Tyr's wife being unfaithful with Loki himself. Loki speaks to Tyr, stanza 38. Be silent, Tyr. You could never deal straight between two people, and I must mention that right hand of yours which Fenrir tore from you. Tyr responds with dignity. Stanza 39, paraphrased. I may be lacking a hand, but you are lacking the Hrodvitnir, Fenrir. Sad is the loss for each. The wolf waits in chains until the doom of the gods. Tyr acknowledges his loss but points to Loki's greater loss and the impending doom Fenrir represents. Loki continues his taunt, stanza 40, paraphrased, Be silent, Tyr. It so happened that your wife had a son by me. You never got a penny's worth of recompense for that injury, you wretch. Loki claims to have cuckolded Tyr, and that Tyr was powerless to do anything about it. Freya, Tyr's companion and Njord's son, now speaks, warning Loki of his impending doom. Freya speaks, I see the wolf Fenrir lying at the river's mouth until the powers are torn apart. You too shall be bound next to him if you do not hold your peace. You worker of mischief. Freya predicts Loki's binding. Loki mocks Freya for having given away his magic sword, which fights on its own for Gerd, the giantess, and implies Freya will be defenseless at Ragnarok. Loki speaks to Frey. Stanza 42, paraphrased. With gold you bought Gyrmir's daughter, Gerd, and so sold your sword. But when Muspel's sons, the fire giants, ride through Mirkwood, you, wretched one, will not know how to fight. Bilgvir, Freya's servant, a minor deity associated with barley and brewing, foolishly speaks up to defend his master. Bigvir speaks. Stanza 43, paraphrased lineage, and so honoured a seat. I would crush this ill-omened crow Loki like marrow and strike him limb from limb. Loki contemptuously dismisses Bigvir. Loki speaks to Bigvir, stanza 44, paraphrased, What is that little thing I see, wagging its tail and yapping greedily? Ever you are at Freya's ears or chattering under the quernstone. He continues, in stanza 45, You are called brave among men, Bigvir, when ale is being distributed, but you are nowhere to be found when men were fighting. Heimdallr, the guardian of Bifrost, now interjects, telling Loki he is drunk and witless. Heimdallr speaks as stanza 46, paraphrased. Loki, you are drunk and have lost your senses. Why don't you stop, Loki? For drunken brawling always ends in such a way that men afterwards regret their strife. Loki attacks Heimdallr, mocking his role as guardian and the uncomfortable, stiff posture he must maintain. Loki speaks to Heimdallr. Paraphrase Heimdallr. For you in ancient days a hateful life was decreed. With a muddy back you must ever be, and keep watch as guardian of the gods. Gardi, the giantess, wife of Njordr and daughter of the slain Thjazi, now speaks, her words filled with cold menace, directly referencing Loki's role in her father's death and foreshadowing his punishment. Skadi speaks, stanza 48, paraphrased, You will not long play with your tail wagging free, for on a rock's point, with the ice-cold entrails of your son, the gods shall bind you. This is a direct and chilling prophecy of his imminent doom. Loki, undeterred, boasts of his primary role in Thjazi's death. Loki speaks to Skadi. Paraphrased, paraphrase, Mimoneia. Be silent, Skadi. Know this, if you speak so sharply, that at the slaying of your father, Thjazi, I was first and foremost among those who dealt the death blow. Skadi delivers a final curse. Know this then, if you were first and foremost at the slaying of my father Thjazi, From my sanctuaries and plains shall ever come to you ill counsels, baleful runes/curses. At this point, Sif, Thor's wife, comes forward. She pours mead into a crystal cup for Loki, attempting a gesture of peace or perhaps a final plea for him to desist, appealing to him to spare her from his slander. Sif speaks. Stanza 51, paraphrased. Hail to you now, Loki, and take this crystal cup full of ancient mead. At least me alone among the blameless Aesir, may you grant that I remain free from stain. Loki accepts the cup, but immediately launches into a cruel taunt, claiming he cuckolded Thor by sleeping with Sif herself. Loki speaks to Sif, stanza 52, paraphrased. You alone would be if you were so shy and wary towards men. But I know one, and I think I know him well, who cuckolded Thor. And that was cunning, Loki. This is a direct claim of adultery with Thor's wife. The tension in the hall has reached its breaking point. Just as Loki utters this final, outrageous insult, the mighty Thor himself arrives, his presence heralded by the shaking of the hall. Thor speaks, his voice like thunder, stanza 53, paraphrased, My mighty hammer, Mjolnir, shall silence your speech. I shall strike that rock head of yours from your shoulders, and then your life will be ended. Thor threatens immediate, lethal violence. Loki, for the first time showing a hint of fear before physical power, taunts Thor, stanza 54, paraphrased, the son of earth. Thor, you will not dare to do so when you have to fight the wolf, Fenrir, and he swallows Sigfather, Odin, father of victory, whole. Loki tries to unnerve Thor by invoking the horrors of Ragnarok. Thor repeats his threat, stanza 55, paraphrased. Be silent, you wretched creature. My mighty hammer, Mjolnir, shall silence your speech. I shall hurl you up into the east, where no man shall ever see you again. Loki continues to mock Thor's past adventures, stanza 56, paraphrased. Of your eastern journeys you should never speak to men, since you a hero cowered in the thumb of a glove. That was hardly like Thor. Loki refers to Thor's encounter with Skrymir, Utgarda Loki. Thor is resolute, stanza 57, paraphrased. My mighty hammer, Mjolnir, shall silence your speech. With this right hand I shall smite you with Hrungnir's bane, Mjolnir, so that every one of your bones is broken. Loki, perhaps realizing Thor is about to act, makes a final defiant statement, but also signals his departure, stanza 58. Paraphrased, though you threaten me with your hammer. Sharp, you thought, was Skrymmir's straps, and you couldn't get at your food and starved with hunger. He continues in stanza 59. I have spoken before the Aesir, and before the sons of the Aesir, that which my spirit urged me. But now for you alone, Thor, I will go out, for I know that you do strike. Loki then departs Aegir's hall, leaving a wake of shattered reputations, exposed secrets, and irreconcilable enmity. His final words are a curse upon Aegir for hosting the feast. The Lokasenna is a devastating catalogue of accusations, revealing a darker, more fallible side to the Aesir gods, at least through Loki's biased and embittered perspective. Whether all his claims are true is debatable. Some may be slander, others exaggerated truths, and some perhaps reflections of older, forgotten myths. However, the poem serves as the ultimate expression of Loki's alienation from the gods. He has burned every bridge, insulted every major figure, and openly boasted of his role in their greatest tragedy. There can be no reconciliation after this. The Lokasenna marks the point where Loki transitions from a tolerated, if troublesome member of the divine community to an outright enemy, paving the way for his inevitable capture and punishment. And that punishment, though it will be detailed more extensively in a later video focusing on the prelude to Ragnarok, must be briefly outlined here as the direct consequence of his actions, particularly the death of Baldr and the venom of the Lokasenna. The gods, their patience finally exhausted and their hearts hardened against their former companion, hunted Loki down. He attempted to evade them by transforming into a salmon and hiding in Franangrofsfors, but they eventually caught him. His sons, by Sigyn, Nafi, and Váli, were brought forth. The gods transformed Váli into a savage wolf, which then attacked and killed his brother Nafi. Using Nafi's still-warm entrails, which magically turned into fetters of iron, the gods bound Loki securely to 3 massive sharp-edged rocks inside a desolate cave. Skadi, still seeking vengeance for her father Thjazi's death, took a venomous serpent and fastened it to a stalactite above Loki's head, so that its burning poison would drip continuously onto his face. In a testament to her unwavering devotion, Loki's wife Sigyn remained by his side. She sat with him in that dreadful cave, holding a bowl above his head to catch the serpent's venom. But whenever the bowl became full and she had to turn away to empty it, some of the poison would inevitably drip onto Loki. The agony was so intense that his writhing convulsions would shake the entire earth, and this, according to Norse belief, was the cause of earthquakes. There, Loki was condemned to lie, bound and tormented until the dawn of Ragnarok, when his bonds would finally break, and he would lead the forces of chaos against the gods in the final cataclysmic battle. This brief overview of his binding serves as the grim conclusion to Loki's active involvement with the Aesir prior to the world's end. It is the terrible price he paid for his escalating malevolence, his inability to curb his destructive impulses, and his ultimate betrayal of those who had, for so long, tolerated his presence. Even his blood brother Odin. Loki's story is a profound tragedy, a fall from a position of privilege and even affection to one of utter damnation, driven by his own complex and ultimately self-destructive nature. Baldr, often called Baldr the Good, was a beacon of virtue among the Aesir, a god so fair and beloved that his presence brought warmth and gladness to all. His story is one of pristine innocence shattered by inexplicable malice, a narrative that underscores the fragility of goodness in a world where darkness and treachery can find even the smallest crack through which to enter. His death is not merely a personal tragedy for the gods, it is a cosmic wound, an event that irrevocably alters the divine landscape and signals the encroaching shadows of Ragnarok. To understand Baldr's significance, we begin with the full details of his parentage. He was born of the most exalted lineage within Asgard. His father was none other than Odin, the All-Father, the wise and powerful king of the Aesir. This made Baldr a cherished son of the chief god, privy to the highest echelons of divine society. Odin himself, with his profound wisdom and prophetic insights, was deeply aware of the doom that haunted his radiant son. The Eddic poem Baldr's Drama, or Baldr's Dreams, also known as Víðarr, recounts Odin's desperate journey to the very gates of hell. Disguised as the wanderer Víðarr, he summons a long-dead Volva, a seeress, from her grave to interpret Baldr's terrifying nightmares. The seeress reluctantly reveals the grim fate awaiting Baldr, that he is destined to be slain, that Höðr will be his killer, and that Váli will be his avenger. This foreknowledge cast a long shadow over Odin, fueling his relentless quest for ways to understand and perhaps delay the inevitable, though ultimately even the All-Father could not entirely circumvent the threads of destiny. Baldr's mother was the equally revered Frigg, queen of the Aesir, goddess of marriage, motherhood, and prophetic wisdom. Baldr was her most beloved son, the apple of her eye, and her love for him was boundless and fierce. As we shall see, it was Frigg's profound maternal devotion that drove her to undertake an extraordinary endeavor to protect him from all harm. And it was her heart that suffered the most devastating blow when tragedy struck. Born to the supreme deities of the Aesir, Baldr embodied the noblest qualities of his divine heritage. His brothers included the unfortunate Höðr, often described as Baldr's blind twin or close brother, also a son of Frigg, whose fate would become tragically intertwined with Baldr's. Another son of Odin and Frigg was Heimdallr the Brave, who would later undertake the perilous journey to Hel in an attempt to ransom his fallen brother. Baldr also had several notable half-brothers through Odin's unions with other goddesses and giantesses, including the mighty Thor, the silent Víðarr, and the swift avenger Váli. This placed Baldr at the very heart of the divine family, his radiance a cherished light within their often stormy relations. The very nature of Baldr was one of unparalleled goodness and beauty. He was preeminently the god of light, purity, beauty, joy, innocence, wisdom, and eloquence. His physical appearance was said to be so dazzlingly fair, so bright and shining, that a radiant light emanated from him. It is told that the whitest of all flowers, a type of chamomile, was named Baldrsbrá, or Baldr's brow, of Baldr's brow, in honor of his luminous visage, likening its white petals to his eyelashes. But his beauty was not merely skin deep, it was a reflection of his inner goodness. Baldr was renowned for his wisdom, his gentle demeanor, his merciful judgments, and his eloquent speech. So fair and just were his pronouncements that all his decrees were said to be inviolable. He was universally beloved by all gods, goddesses, humans, and indeed by almost all of creation, with the tragic and fateful exception of Loki. His presence brought joy, peace, and harmony wherever he went. Unlike the martial prowess of Thor or the often ruthless cunning of Odin, Baldr represented a more serene, inherent goodness, a passive yet powerful radiance that illuminated Asgard. It is precisely this pure and blameless nature that makes his undeserved death at the hands of treachery so profoundly tragic and unjust. A wound from which the cosmos itself seemed to recoil. The story of Baldr's invulnerability is a testament to his mother's fierce love and her desperate attempt to defy fate. As mentioned, Baldr began to be plagued by terrible and ominous dreams, nightmares that foretold his own impending death. These dark premonitions filled not only Baldr, but all the Aesir with profound anxiety and sorrow. The gods held many councils, seeking ways to avert the doom that seemed to hang over their most cherished member. It was Frigg, driven by an all-consuming maternal love and a desperate resolve to protect her son at any cost, who embarked on an extraordinary quest. She journeyed throughout all the 9 realms, from the fiery depths of Muspelheim to the icy wastes of Niflheim, from the halls of the giants to the dwellings of dwarves and elves. In each realm she approached every conceivable entity and extracted from them a solemn and binding oath that they would not harm Baldr in any way. The scope of her undertaking was truly monumental. Snorri Sturluson, in his Prose Edda, provides a detailed list of the categories of things from which Frigg secured these sacred pledges. She took oaths from fire and water, from iron and all other kinds of metal, from stones great and small, from the earths themselves, every type of soil and ground, from all trees and plants, from all sicknesses and diseases that might afflict a body, from all beasts of the field and forest, from all birds of the air, from all poisons that creep or flow, and from all serpents and crawling things. So thorough was her effort, so comprehensive her plea, that it seemed no harm could possibly befall her son. However, in this vast and painstaking endeavor, there was one single, seemingly insignificant oversight. As Frigg herself later revealed, under Loki's cunning questioning, there was a young shoot of mistletoe growing west of Valhalla. She had not taken an oath from this plant, deeming it too young, or in some interpretations, too harmless and inconsequential to demand such a solemn pledge. This tiny, overlooked detail, this single exception in a world sworn to Baldr's safety, would prove to be the fatal flaw in Frigg's otherwise impenetrable shield of protection. With Baldr now believed to be completely invulnerable, a new custom arose among the gods. In their assemblies, they would amuse themselves by testing his immunity. They would hurl all manner of weapons at him, spears, axes, swords, stones, and throw other objects, only to watch with delight as everything veered away or bounced harmlessly off him, leaving Baldr untouched and smiled. This sport was a testament to their relief and joy, a celebration of Frigg's success in safeguarding their beloved friend. But this very scene of joyful invulnerability also set the stage for Loki's malevolent intervention. As we have recounted in our exploration of Loki, it was his bitter envy and deep-seated malice that drove him to seek out Baldr's one weakness. Disguising himself as an old woman, Loki approached Frigg and, through clever and deceitful questioning, tricked her into revealing the secret of the mistletoe. Armed with this knowledge, Loki fashioned a dart from the seemingly harmless plant and, finding Baldr's blind brother Höðr standing apart from the god's sport, cruelly guided Höd's hand to hurl the mistletoe projectile. The dart struck Baldr, and he fell dead, his light extinguished from Asgard. The tragic irony of this event is profound. a near-perfect shield of maternal love and divine power, undone by a single, overlooked detail exploited by pure malice. It is a stark reminder of the limits of even the most determined efforts against the insidious workings of fate and the destructive power of envy. Baldr's beloved wife was the goddess Nanna Nepstottir, the daughter of an obscure figure named Nepri, who may have been a minor god. Nanna was utterly devoted to Baldr, and his sudden and tragic death completely shattered her. So profound was her grief, so unbearable her sorrow, that as Baldr's body was being prepared for his magnificent funeral pyre aboard his great ship Hringorni, Nanna's heart broke. She collapsed and died of pure grief. In a poignant testament to their inseparable love, the gods placed Nanna's body upon the funeral pyre alongside her husband, so that they might journey together into the afterlife. Even from the realm of hell, Nanna's thoughts were with those she left behind. When Hermod later visited hell in an attempt to ransom Baldr, Nanna sent gifts back with him to Frigg, a precious linen gown, and to Frigg's faithful attendant Fulla, a golden finger ring, tokens of remembrance from the land of the dead. From the union of Baldr and Nanna came a son named Forseti. Forseti inherited many of his father's noble qualities, becoming the Aesir god of justice, peace, and reconciliation. He was known for his wisdom and his ability to preside over legal disputes, mediating between conflicting parties and bringing about peaceful resolutions. So, fair and impartial were his judgments that all who brought their cases before him were said to find true reconciliation. Justice's dwelling in Asgard was a magnificent hall called Glitnir, a name meaning shining or glittering. This hall was described as having pillars of radiant red gold and a roof of gleaming silver, symbolizing the purity and truth of the justice administered within its walls. It was to Glitnir that gods and mortals alike could bring their grievances, confident that they would receive a fair hearing and that disputes would be settled equitably. While Forseti could not prevent the tragic fate of his father Baldr, his existence and his role as a god of justice demonstrate a continuation of Baldr's positive attributes into the next generation. Forseti is often seen as a more active dispenser of justice and mediation than his more passively good father, representing an enduring hope for order and fairness, even in a world increasingly shadowed by conflict. Finally, Baldr's own hall in Asgard was named Bríðarblik, which translates as broad shining or wide splendor. Situated in the heavens, Bríðarblik was renowned as the most beautiful and pure of all dwellings. Its defining characteristic was its immaculate nature. It was said that nothing unclean, impure, or false could ever enter its sacred precincts. No evil or baleful influence could exist there. As the poems state, it was the place, Thar minster bosleget, where baleful runes or evil/harm are least found or laid. Bríðarblik was a perfect reflection of Baldr's own nature, luminous, pure, and untainted by any form of wickedness, at least until the tragedy that befell its master. It stood as a symbol of peace, light, and pristine innocence within the often turbulent and morally complex realm of Asgard. The story of Baldr is one of heartbreaking beauty and profound sorrow. His life represented the pinnacle of Aesir's virtue, and his death, orchestrated by Loki's malice, was not merely the loss of a beloved god, but a fatal crack in the very foundation of the divine world. It signaled the loss of innocence for the gods, the dimming of Asgard's light, and the acceleration of events leading towards the twilight of Ragnarok. Yet, even in his demise, there is a glimmer of future hope, for it is prophesied that Baldr will eventually return from hell after the old world has been purged by fire and water, to inhabit a new, purified world, bringing with him the promise of renewal and an age of peace. His image endures as a powerful symbol of inherent goodness, radiant light, and the ultimate tragic sacrifice in the face of encroaching darkness. Our exploration of the Aesir assembly now brings us to Tyr, a god whose name is synonymous with valor and the solemnity of oaths. He is a key warrior deity, yet his most enduring legacy is not one of battlefield slaughter, but of a courageous, legalistic sacrifice made to protect his kin and the stability of Asgard. The full details of Tyr's role within the Norse pantheon paint him as a god of multifaceted responsibilities, primarily centered around conflict and justice. He is undeniably a god of war, but his domain within warfare is specific. He is not typically associated with the wild battle fury of Odin's berserkers, nor the overwhelming elemental might of Thor. Instead, Tyr represents heroic glory achieved through valor, justice in warfare, the proper conduct and formalities of conflict, and the assemblies or things where matters of law and dispute, including those related to war, were settled. Warriors would invoke Tyr for courage and for victory, particularly in duels or situations demanding exceptional bravery and adherence to a code of honor. Runes bearing his name, the Ty rune or Tiwaz, were often carved onto weapons to ensure victory. Beyond the battlefield, Tyr is profoundly a god of law and justice. His name itself is etymologically linked to the concept of the divine and, by extension, divine order and law. He is closely associated with the Thing, the crucial legal and governmental assembly in Germanic societies, where laws were made, disputes judged, and important communal decisions taken. Indeed, the day of the week we know as Tuesday is derived from Tuesday, Old English Tiwursdag, and Tuesdays were often traditional days for holding such assemblies. Tyr embodies the principles of order, fairness, the sanctity of oaths, and the binding nature of contracts. His willingness to sacrifice his own hand in the binding of Fenrir can be seen in a grim way as an upholding of a pledge, even one made within a context of divine deception. Courage and self-sacrifice are thus the supreme virtues that define Tyr, qualities crystallized forever in his encounter with the monstrous wolf. One of the most fascinating aspects of Tyr is his potential older status within the Germanic pantheon. A status that hints at a time when he may have held an even more prominent, perhaps supreme, position. This theory is primarily rooted in linguistic evidence. Tyr's name, from Proto-Germanic Tiwaz, is a direct cognate with the names of other chief sky gods in various Indo-European cultures. For instance, it aligns with the Greek Zeus Pateia, the Roman Jupiter, from an older Diospiter. All these venerable names trace back to a Proto-Indo-European root, likely Diospiter, which translates as Sky Father. This powerful etymological connection strongly suggests that the figure who became Tyr in Norse mythology may have originally been the principal sky god for the early Germanic peoples, long before Odin rose to the dominant position he occupies in the later Viking Age myths that have survived. The evolution of the Norse pantheon likely saw a gradual shift, with Odin god associated with wisdom, esoteric knowledge, magic, sed, poetry, death, and the ecstatic fury of battle, progressively overshadowing and assimilating many of the functions of this older primary sky deity. What we see of Tyr in the later myths, his strong association with law, justice, and formal assemblies, might well be surviving traces of an ancient, supreme judicial and sovereign function. His role as a war god, too, might have initially been more encompassing before being specialized alongside Thor and Odin. While the myths themselves do not explicitly state this ancient primacy, the linguistic evidence provides a compelling argument for Tyr's deep historical roots and his possible former reign as a paramount deity, a sky father for a bygone era. Now we turn to the saga that defines Tyr above all others, the terrifying and heroic tale of the binding of the Fenris wolf, Fenrir, with every nuance of its unfolding. This myth is not just an adventure story. It is a profound exploration of courage, sacrifice, the desperate measures taken by the gods to preserve order, and the inexorable march towards a prophesied doom. The threat of Fenrir was immense. As we know, Fenrir was one of the monstrous offspring of Loki and the giantess Angrboda. Prophecies had foretold that this wolf was destined for great evil, that he would grow to an unimaginable size and strength, and that he would ultimately be responsible for the death of Odin himself at Ragnarok. Despite these dire predictions, the Aesir initially attempted to raise Fenrir in Asgard. However, the wolf grew at such an alarming rate, his size and ferocity increasing daily, that soon all the gods were filled with terror at the sight of him. Indeed, such was his menacing presence that only Tyr, with his exceptional and unwavering courage, dared to approach Fenrir to provide him with food. This early interaction establishes Tyr's unique bravery and perhaps a nascent, if doomed, connection with the creature he would later help to bind. As Fenrir's power burgeoned, the gods held anxious councils. They realized that the wolf could not be allowed to roam free, for the safety of Asgard and all the realms was at stake. Yet the challenge was monumental. How could they possibly bind a creature of such rapidly increasing and already colossal strength? Their first attempts were based on a mixture of brute force and deception. The gods fashioned a very strong fetter they named Leidingr, which can be translated as leading or snare. They approached Fenrir and presented the binding as a mere game, a test of his renowned strength. They suggested that if he could break Leidingr, his might would be famous throughout the worlds. Fenrir, though perhaps suspicious, was also proud and confident in his power. He allowed himself to be bound with Leidingr. With a mighty effort, he strained against the fetter, flexed his powerful muscles, and Leidingr shattered into pieces. The gods were dismayed, but Fenrir had proven his strength. Undeterred, the Aesir set about creating a second fetter, one far stronger than the first. This they named Dromi, meaning chainer or fetter. They declared it to be twice as strong as Leidingr. Once again they approached Fenrir, praising his previous feat and goading him to try his strength against this new, more formidable bond. They told him his fame would be unparalleled if he could also break Dromi. Fenrir considered this. He acknowledged that Dromi looked much stronger, but he also recognized that his own strength had grown considerably since he had broken Leidingr. He reasoned that to achieve great fame one must sometimes take risks, and so he permitted the gods to bind him with Dromi. A tremendous struggle ensued. Fenrir strained, kicked, and thrashed with all his might. The earth trembled with his efforts. Finally, with a colossal surge of power, Dromi too burst asunder, its fragments flying in all directions. This feat was so remarkable that it gave rise to common sayings for achieving something with great difficulty. To get loose from Leidingr, leis or Leidingi, or to dash out of Dromi, leis or Droma. The gods, however, were now filled with despair, fearing that no earthly chain could ever hold the wolf. It was then that Odin, the All-Father, resolved to seek a solution beyond mortal means. He dispatched Freyr's trusted messenger, Skirnir, on a perilous journey to Svartalfaheimr, the subterranean realm of the Dark Elves, or Dwarves, who were renowned as the most skilled smiths and craftsmen in all the cosmos. Skirnir commissioned these master artisans to create a magical fetter, one that could hold even the mighty. The dwarves accepted the challenge and, using their secret arts and unparalleled skill, forged a unique bond they named Gleipnir, a name that can mean deceiver or entangler. Gleipnir was no ordinary chain. It was crafted from 6 seemingly impossible, paradoxical ingredients, substances that, by their very nature, should not exist, thus imbuing the fetter with potent magic. Is made from, first, the sound of a cat's footfall, second, the beard of a woman, third, the roots of a mountain, fourth, the sinews, or some sources suggest the longing or awareness of a bear, fifth, the breath of a fish, and sixth, the spittle of a bird. Despite being fashioned from these ethereal and intangible things, Gleipnir had the appearance of being merely a smooth, soft silk ribbon. Yet it possessed an unbreakable strength, a magical resilience that belied its delicate look. This deceptive appearance was crucial to its purpose. Armed with Gleipnir, the Aesir approached Fenrir for a third time. They led him to a remote island called Lyngvi, Heather Island, situated in the middle of a dark lake named Amsvarnir, red-black. They showed Fenrir the silken ribbon Gleipnir, once again proposing it as a test of his strength. They claimed that though it looked slight, it was stronger than it appeared, and they challenged him to try and break it. To lend credence to their claim, some of the gods attempted to snap the ribbon themselves, but, of course, failed, making it seem a plausible, if difficult, test. Fenrir, however, was now deeply suspicious. He had been tricked twice before, and his cunning was growing alongside his strength. He looked at the slender silken band and sensed there was more to it than met the eye. He suspected trickery and magic. He declared that if Gleipnir was indeed made with such craft and deceit, then, no matter how slight it appeared, it would not come onto his legs. He then put forth a counter-proposal, a crucial test of the god's intentions. He reasoned that if he could not break this seemingly delicate band, then the gods would surely have no further fear of him and would likely release him. However, he added, if they did not intend to release him should he fail to break it, then their help in freeing him later would be slow in coming. Therefore, he stated with grim determination he would not allow himself to be bound by Gleipnir unless one of the Aesir would place their hand into his mouth as a pledge, Rígr, explicit horus, a solemn token of good faith that there was no deceit involved and that they would indeed release him if he could not break the fetter. A heavy silence fell upon the assembled gods. They looked at one another, each unwilling to make such a terrifying sacrifice, for they knew in their hearts that they had no intention of ever releasing Fenrir if Gleipnir held. Their own deception was now laid bare by the wolf's demand. It was in this moment of collective cowardice and moral compromise that Tyr stepped forward. Alone among the Aesir, Tyr, the god of courage, law, and solemn oaths, found the fortitude to meet Fenrir's terms. Perhaps driven by his inherent bravery, or by a grim adherence to the form of a pledge, even within a deceitful enterprise, Tyr extended his right hand and placed it unflinchingly into the monstrous, slavering jaws of the Fenris wolf. With the pledge thus made, Fenrir allowed the gods to bind him with Gleipnir. He then began to struggle with all his terrifying might. He thrashed and strained, pulling and twisting, but the magical silken ribbon held fast. Indeed, the more he struggled, the tighter Gleipnir seemed to become, its enchanted fibers resisting his every effort. When the gods saw that Fenrir was truly and securely bound, that he could not escape, a wave of relief washed over them, and then all the gods laughed. A harsh, triumphant laughter echoing across the desolate island. All laughed, that is, except for Tyr. He did not laugh, for he knew the price of their victory. Fenrir, realizing he had been utterly deceived and that the gods had no intention of honoring their implicit pledge to release him, snapped his mighty jaws shut. He bit off Tyr's hand at the wrist, a joint thereafter known in Norse tradition as the wolf joint, Ofslid. The gods then took the end of Gleipnir, a part called Gelgja, fetter and threaded it through a massive stone slab named Gjol, resounding. They drove this slab deep into the earth to anchor it. For even greater security, they took another enormous rock called Thviti, thumper or driver, and hammered it even further into the ground as an anchoring peg. Fenrir, enraged and in agony, thrashed and snapped, attempting to bite his captors. To prevent this, the gods thrust a sword into his gaping mouth, positioning the hilt on his lower jaw and the sharp point against his upper palate, effectively propping his jaws wide open and silencing his terrible howls. From his tortured, open mouth, saliva and saliva drooled forth, forming a foaming river that was given the ironic name Van, meaning expectation or hope. And so Fenrir lay bound, gagged and tormented on the island of Lengvi, destined to remain there until the cataclysm of Ragnarok, when his bonds would finally break. Tyr, now forever one-handed, stood as a living symbol of this desperate victory. His sacrifice had ensured the temporary safety of Asgard and the worlds, but it did not alter Fenrir's ultimate destiny, nor did it erase the morally ambiguous nature of the gods' actions. They had used deceit to achieve their ends, and Tyr, the embodiment of courage and law, had paid the terrible personal price for their collective decision. Tyr's story, particularly the binding of Fenrir, highlights his quiet, unwavering strength and his unparalleled courage. It is a stark depiction of the ongoing struggle between the divine forces of order and the primal energies of chaos, a struggle where victory often comes at a great cost, and through means that blur the lines of righteousness. Tyr endures in the mythological imagination as a powerful symbol of law, the solemnity of justice, even in its harshest manifestations, and the ultimate expression of heroic self-sacrifice for the greater good. Heimdallr is a figure of immense importance in the Norse pantheon, primarily revered as the ever-watchful guardian of Asgard and the Bifrost Bridge. His very being is attuned to the slightest disturbances, making him the first line of defense against the forces of chaos that threaten the realm of the Aesir. The full details of Heimdallr's parentage are among the most intriguing and symbolic in all of Norse mythology. He is famously said to have been born of 9 mothers. This extraordinary birth immediately sets him apart and imbues him with a deep connection to the primal forces of the cosmos. These 9 mothers are most often interpreted as the 9 daughters of Rígr, the sea Jotun, and Ran, his wife, meaning Heimdallr was born of 9 personified waves of the sea. The names of these wave maidens, as listed in various poetic sources, include Himinglaeva, Heaven Clear, Dufar, the Dipping One, Bloody Gadda, referring to Red Sea foam, Hefring, Riser, Ullr or Unn, Frothing Wave, Hrun, Welling Wave, Bilug, Billow, Droff. Being born of these 9 sisters suggests Heimdallr's intrinsic link to the vast, powerful, and ever-changing ocean, a realm that often represents both life-giving and destructive potential. Alternative scholarly interpretations suggest his 9 mothers could symbolize 9 different aspects of the earth, or perhaps 9 giantesses associated with the boundary between the earth and the sea. The Eddic poem Heimdallr further elaborates on his nurturing, stating that Heimdallr was nourished by the strength of the earth, the ice-cold sea, and the blood of swine, likely referring to sacrificial boars. This poetic imagery reinforces his connection to fundamental elemental powers. The symbolism of being born from 9 mothers is potent. It could signify his completeness, his immense strength derived from multiple sources, or his profound integration with the manifold energies of the natural world. While later, more systematized accounts sometimes list Odin as his father, the ancient tradition of his birth from 9 mothers is far more distinctive and emphasizes his somewhat otherworldly and primordial origins. Complementing his unique birth are Heimdallr's extraordinary senses, which are perfectly suited to his role as Asgard's sentinel. His hearing is nothing short of miraculous. It is said that he needs less sleep than a bird, and that his ears are so keen he can hear grass growing on the earth and even the sound of wool growing on the backs of sheep. This incredible auditory acuity allows him to detect the faintest whisper of approaching danger from unimaginable distances, ensuring that no enemy can approach Asgard unannounced. His sight is equally phenomenal. Heimdallr can see for hundreds of miles, or as some texts poetically state, 100 leagues. And his vision is unimpaired by darkness. He can see equally well by day or by night. These superhuman senses make him the ultimate watchman, ever alert, ever vigilant, his gaze and hearing constantly sweeping the horizons for any sign of threat. Central to Heimdallr's role as the herald of doom is his mighty horn, Gjallarhorn, which translates as the yelling horn or resounding horn. The primary and most awesome purpose of Gjallarhorn is to signal the onset of Ragnarok. When the final battle is imminent, when the forces of chaos begin their ultimate assault on the cosmos, Heimdallr will raise Gjallarhorn to his lips, and its resounding blast will echo throughout all the 9 realms. This single, terrible note will alert all gods, giants, humans, and every other being to the commencement of the world's end. The location of Gjallarhorn, when it is not in use, is described with some ambiguity, linking it to places of deep wisdom and fate. Snorri Sturluson mentions that Heimdallr's Aljot, which can mean hearing, but in this context is often interpreted as his horn itself, is hidden at Mimisbrunn, Mimis Well of Wisdom, or beneath the roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil, near the Urdarbrunna, the well of Urd, where the Norns dispense fate. Snorri even connects Odin's sacrifice of his eye for a drink from Mimir's well to gaining access to this Haljolt, or horn. This association, whether the horn itself or Heimdallr's hearing ability is meant, ties Gjallarhorn to the deepest secrets of the cosmos and the inexorable unfolding of destiny. The horn is thus not merely an alarm, it is an instrument of fate, its sound signifying an unavoidable and cataclysmic turning point in cosmic history. Heimdallr's dwelling in Asgard is his hall, Himinbjörg, a name meaning heaven's mountain or sky cliffs. This hall is strategically situated at the very edge of Asgard, precisely where the shimmering Bifrost Bridge, the rainbow path connecting Midgard to Asgard, meets the realm of the gods. It is from Himinbjörg that Himinbjörg maintains his constant watch. The poem Grimnismal describes it thus: Himinbjörg is the eighth, and there Heimdallr, they say, rules o'er his holy shrines. There the god's watchman, glad in his goodly house, drinks the good mead. This location underscores his critical role as the primary defender of Asgard's gates against any intruders, particularly the Gjörnar, who constantly seek to invade the god's domain. Beyond these primary attributes, Heimdallr is known by other distinctive features. He is often referred to as the White God, Havitias, a title that may allude to his radiant appearance, his purity of purpose, his connection to light, or perhaps his shining armor. He possesses teeth made of gold, earning him the epithet Gullantani, golden-toothed. His noble steed is named Gulltopper, meaning golden-tufted or golden mane. Furthermore, Heimdallr has a deep-seated and fatal enmity with Loki. They are prophesied to be each other's slayers at Ragnarok, a final confrontation between the guardian of divine order and the ultimate agent of chaos. Perhaps one of the most intriguing and socially significant aspects of Heimdallr's mythology is his role as the divine progenitor Rígr, as detailed in the Eddic poem Rígstula, or the Lay of Rígr. While the poem itself does not explicitly state Heimdallr is Rígr, a prose introduction to the lay in the Codex Wormianus makes this identification, and it is widely accepted by scholars. The name Rígr itself is fascinating, as it is an Old Irish word meaning king, lending an immediate sense of royal and ordering significance to this divine figure. Rígstula describes how Rígr journeyed through the world of mortals and, by fathering sons in 3 distinct households, established the mythological origins of the 3 primary social classes, or castes, of Norse society. The lay begins with Rígr walking along a shoreline. He arrives first at a humble and impoverished hut. Inside he finds an elderly couple. A, meaning great-grandfather, and Edda, meaning great-grandmother. They are poor, their dwelling is meagre, and their food consists of coarse, unleavened bread and a thin broth served in a bowl. Rígr announces himself as a wanderer, and they offer him what little hospitality they can. He stays with them for 3 nights, and each night he sleeps in the bed between A and Edda, offering them counsel. After his departure, 9 months later, Edda gives birth to a son. He is named Thrail, meaning thrall or slave/serf. Thrail is described as being dark-skinned and ugly, with a rough, wrinkled back, thick fingers, and a clumsy build. His life is one of unremitting toil. He carries heavy burdens, cuts firewood, dungs the fields, builds fences, and tends to swine and goats. Thrail eventually marries a woman named Thur, whose name also signifies a slave woman or drudge. She is depicted as being bandy-legged, with a scarred or sunburned nose and rough arms. From their union spring the entire class of thralls, their many children given names that reflect their lowly status and arduous labour, such as Fusnef, Snotty Nose, Drumba, Log-like, Clacker, Clod, and Kegya, Stumpy. Their existence is one of servitude and hard physical work at the very bottom of the social ladder. Rígr continues his journey and next arrives at a well-ordered farmhouse, a place of greater comfort and prosperity. Here he meets Afi, meaning grandfather, and Amma, meaning grandmother. They are engaged in productive tasks. Afi is busy whittling a loom beam, while Amma is spinning yarn, her attire neat and her demeanor industrious. Their dwelling is well kept, and they offer Rígr good food and proper hospitality. As before, Rígr stays with them for 3 nights, sleeping in the bed between Afi and Amma, and giving them counsel. 9 months after he leaves, Amma gives birth to a son. He is named Karl, meaning churl or peasant. Karl is described as being ruddy-faced, with keen, lively eyes. He grows up to be skilled in practical arts. He learns to tame oxen, fashion ploughs and tools, build houses and barns, and drive carts. Karl eventually marries a woman named Snor, a name that can mean daughter-in-law but also implies nimbleness or a well-adorned woman, as she is described with keys at her belt, signifying her status as mistress of a household. From their union comes the entire class of Karls, the freemen. Their offspring bear names that reflect their status as skilled farmers, craftsmen, and respected householders, such as Hel, man or hero, Smid, smith, smith, Bondi, farmer/yeoman, and Drangra, valiant man or good fellow. Their lives are characterized by productive labor, self-sufficiency, and the ownership of land. Finally, Rígr continues his journey and arrives at a wealthy and stately hall, a place of luxury and refinement. Inside, he finds Fenrir, meaning father, and Modir, meaning mother. They are engaged in aristocratic pursuits. Fenrir is stringing a bow, polishing arrows, and preparing his weapons, while Modir is admiring her fine clothes, smoothing linen, and arranging her sleeve. Their hall is richly appointed, and they offer Rígr the finest food and drink from silver platters and ornate goblets. Once again, Rígr stays for 3 nights, sleeping in the bed between Fenrir and Modir and offering them counsel. 9 months after his departure, Modir gives birth to a son. He is named Jarl, meaning earl or nobleman. Jarl is described as being exceptionally handsome, fair-haired, with bright cheeks and eyes as piercing and fierce as those of a young serpent. From a young age, he displays aristocratic skills. He learns archery, spear throwing, horsemanship, and swordplay. He also learns to swim and, significantly, he is taught to understand runes. At this point, Rígr himself returns. He acknowledges Jarl as his own son, gives Jarl his own name, Rígr, and formally teaches him the secrets of the runes. He then urges Jarl to claim his ancestral lands and to win more. Jarl follows this counsel, waging war, conquering territories, distributing wealth, rings and treasures to his followers, and gaining great renown as a warrior and leader. Jarl eventually marries Urna, meaning brisk or capable, who is the daughter of a Hersir, a local chieftain or lord. Urna is described as wise, fair, and slender-fingered. From their union springs the entire class of Jarls, the nobility and warrior aristocracy. Their children are given names reflecting their high birth and leadership potential, such as Bursan in a noble sense, Barn child, also with noble connotations, Jofur, prince or chief, and most importantly, Konrun Gu, meaning Kon the young or noble scion. The poem culminates with Konra Unga, the youngest and wisest of Jarl's sons. He surpasses even his father in skill and knowledge. He learns runes to an even greater degree, gains the ability to understand the speech of birds, can quench fire and calm stormy seas, and possesses the power to heal troubled minds. So great is his wisdom and cunning that he even vies with Rígr himself in runic knowledge and tricked him and won, thereby earning the right to be called Rígr, and by extension, Konunguru, king. This establishes the mythological lineage of kings who derive their authority not just from birth, but also from superior wisdom, magical knowledge, especially of runes, and proven capability. The Rígstula is a profoundly significant poem. It provides a mythological charter for the hierarchical social structure of Norse society, legitimizing the distinct roles, responsibilities, and status of each class, thralls, carls, and jarls, as being divinely ordained by Heimdallr in his guise as Rígr. By portraying Heimdallr / Rígr as a progenitor of humanity, or at least of its social order, the poem connects him to the very foundations of society and creation, a role somewhat analogous to the figure of Manus described by Tacitus in his Germania as the ancestor of the Germanic peoples. The strong emphasis on the Jarl class's mastery of runes underscores the intimate connection perceived between knowledge, especially esoteric knowledge, power and nobility in the Norse worldview. The poem's conclusion, with Konra Ungra, suggests that while social order is established, there is also a path for exceptional individuals to rise, and that true kingship is ultimately founded on superior wisdom and capability. Heimdallr thus emerges as a deity of remarkable complexity, the ever-vigilant guardian of Asgard's borders, the mysterious offspring of 9 mothers, the possessor of senses beyond mortal comprehension, the herald of cosmic doom, and the divine architect of human social order. His unwavering watchfulness is crucial for maintaining the precarious boundary between the divine order of Asgard and the ever-present threat of chaos from the worlds beyond. His role in the Rígr further solidifies his deep connection to the very fabric of human existence and its organization, making him a truly pivotal figure in the Norse mythological landscape. Our journey through the divine halls of Asgard now brings us to a fascinating array of gods and goddesses, each with their own distinct domain and story. We begin with a couple intrinsically linked to the poetic arts and the very vitality of the gods, Bragi and Idunn. Bragi is the esteemed god of poetry, scholarship, and eloquence. He is often depicted as an old man with a long, flowing beard, the very image of a venerable bard. His wisdom is as renowned as his poetic skill, and it is said that runes were carved upon his tongue, signifying his mastery of potent, magical speech. Some scholars have proposed that Bragi may be a deified version of the historical 9th century Norwegian skald Bragi Boddason the Old, whose poetry was highly esteemed. Whether a deified mortal or a god from the beginning, Bragi's role in Asgard is to inspire and craft the sagas and songs that celebrate the deeds of gods and heroes. He is the husband of the goddess Idunn, and in the venomous exchange of the Lokasenna, it is Bragi who first attempts to deny Loki entry to Aegir's feast, upholding the propriety and order that Loki seeks to shatter. His wife, Idunn, is the cherished goddess of youth and rejuvenation, and possibly of spring, though her most critical role is as the keeper of the apples of immortality. These are not ordinary fruits, they are magical apples that the gods and goddesses must consume to maintain their youth, vigor, and divine radiance. Without them, the Aesir would age and wither, becoming frail and mortal. Idunn carefully guards these precious apples in her casket, or Aesir. The abduction of Idunn and her apples is a pivotal myth, one we touched upon when discussing Loki, but it deserves retelling from the perspective of Idunn's vital importance and the ensuing crisis for the gods. The story begins with Odin, Fenrir, and Loki on a journey, famished and attempting to cook an ox. The giant Thiazi, disguised as an enormous eagle, prevents the meat from cooking until they agree to give him a share. When Thiazi seizes the best portions, Loki, in a fit of anger, strikes at the eagle with a staff, only to find himself stuck fast and dragged mercilessly. To secure his release, Loki swears a solemn oath to lure Idunn out of Asgard. Upon returning to Asgard, Loki, with his characteristic cunning, approaches Idunn. He tells her of wondrous apples he has discovered in a nearby wood, apples even more remarkable than her own, and suggests she bring hers for comparison. Idunn, innocent and unsuspecting, accompanies Loki out of Asgard's protective walls, carrying her precious casket of apples. Deep in the woods, Jazi, again in his eagle form, swoops down, seizes the terrified Idunn and her apples, and carries them off to his desolate stronghold, Thrymheim. With Idunn and her life-sustaining apples gone, a terrible change befalls the Aesir. They begin to age rapidly, their skin wrinkles, their hair turns grey, their strength fades, and their divine light dims. Despair grips Asgard. When it is discovered that Idunn was last seen with Loki, the gods, furious and desperate, seize him and threaten him with a torturous death unless he rescues Idunn Forced into action, Loki borrows Freyja's magical falcon feather cloak, transforms into a hawk, and flies to Thrymheimr. Finding Thaisi away, Loki uses his magic to transform Idunn into a small nut, clutching her tightly in his talons for the perilous flight back to Asgard. Thaisi soon returns, discovers Idunn missing, and in his eagle form gives furious chase. As the two birds race towards Asgard, the watching gods pile wood shavings high along the walls. Loki, as the hawk, darts over the ramparts just as the gods ignite the shavings. Thiazi, unable to stop, flies into the wall of fire, his feathers igniting, and he plummets to the ground inside Asgard, where the gods swiftly kill him. Idunn and her apples are restored, and the gods regain their youth. However, Thiazi's death brings his vengeful daughter Skadi to Asgard's gates, setting in motion another chain of events, including her marriage to Unnjordr and Loki's crude appeasement of her. This myth underscores Idunn's absolutely critical role in maintaining the god's vitality and showcases Loki's capacity for treachery and, under duress, his indispensable resourcefulness. Next we encounter Víðarr, a figure of immense strength and grim purpose, known as the Silent God. In Thorglias, his quiet nature perhaps reflects a stoic resolve or the biding of his time for a singular, momentous act. Víðarr is the son of Odin and the Jotun Gridra. Interestingly, Gridra is also known for having aided Thor by providing him with her own magical staff, iron gloves, and belt of strength when Thor faced the giant Gizrad without Mjolnir. Víðarr's strength is said to be second only to Thor's, or perhaps Thor's son Magni. Víðarr is most famous for his thick shoe. This is no ordinary footwear. It is constructed from all the leather scraps that shoemakers throughout the ages have cut from the toe and heel pieces when crafting shoes. This accumulation over countless generations signifies its incredible thickness, durability, and magical resilience. The purpose of this shoe is specific and vital. It is destined to protect Víðarr's foot during his confrontation with the Fenris wolf at Ragnarok. His hall in Asgard is named Landvidi, meaning wide land. Described as a place overgrown with brushwood and tall grass, a wild, somewhat untamed domain fitting for this formidable, silent deity. Víðarr's ultimate destiny unfolds at Ragnarok. After the Fenris wolf swallows Odin whole, Víðarr will stride forth to avenge his father. In a climactic battle, he will place his thick-shod foot upon Fenrir's lower jaw, grasp the wolf's upper jaw with his powerful hands, and with his immense strength, tear the monstrous wolf's mouth apart, thereby slaying him. Víðarr is one of the key gods prophesied to survive the devastation of Ragnarok, and to inhabit the new, reborn world that will emerge from the old. Then there is Váli, another son of Odin, this time with the Jotun Rígr. Váli's existence is defined by a single, swift act of vengeance. He was conceived by Odin specifically to avenge the death of Baldr. The story of his conception is a dark one, involving Odin's difficult and, according to some interpretations, forceful seduction of Rígr, undertaken because prophecies had indicated that only a son born of this union could be Baldr's avenger. Váli's growth was nothing short of miraculous. He reached full manhood in the span of a single day or a single night, according to some sources. He was driven by a singular purpose and bound himself by a vow. He would not wash his hands nor comb his hair until he had fulfilled his destiny. True to his purpose, the one-day-old Váli immediately sought out Höðr, the unwitting slayer of Baldr, and killed him, thus exacting the swift and harsh vengeance required by the codes of that time. Like Víðarr, Váli is also destined to survive Ragnarok and to dwell in the new world, a figure of focused, almost grim determination, born for a specific, violent purpose. This brings us to the tragic figure of Höðr, the blind god. He is generally considered a son of Odin, and Frigg is often implied to be his mother, which would make him Baldr's full brother, possibly even his twin. Höðr's blindness is his defining characteristic and the key to his unwitting role in Asgard's greatest tragedy. As we have recounted, it was Loki who exploited Höðr's lack of sight. During the god's sport of testing Baldr's invulnerability, Loki approached Höðr, provided him with a dart fashioned from the fatal mistletoe, and then guided the blind god's hand. Höðr, innocent of any malicious intent and merely wishing to participate in honoring his brother, threw the dart, which struck and killed Baldr. Despite his innocence in intent, the inexorable laws of blood vengeance demanded a price. Höðr was slain by the aforementioned Váli, Odin's avenging son. Höðr's fate is one of profound sorrow. He is an innocent pawn caught in Loki's web of malice and the harsh dictates of fate. However, there is a glimmer of redemption in his story. It is prophesied that both Höðr and Baldr will return from Hell after Ragnarok to live in the new, purified. Their return suggests a mending of past tragedies, a reconciliation, and the restoration of innocence in the reborn cosmos. We have already met Forseti in detail during our exploration of Baldr, his father. As a brief reminder, Forseti, son of Baldr and Nanna, is the god of justice, peace, and reconciliation. His shining hall, Glitnir, is where he presides over legal disputes, skillfully mediating between conflicting parties and bringing about fair and peaceful resolutions. Next is Ullr, a god associated with several key skills and the winter season. He is the son of Sif, making him Thor's stepson. His biological father is not named in the surviving myths. Ullr is revered as the god of archery, Bogias, or Baugard, skiing or snowshoes, Ondoras, shield shewer, hunting, and also of shields, Skjaldaras, shield god. Indeed, a common kenning or poetic circumlocution for a shield was Ullr. He is often invoked for skill in these pursuits, particularly in duels or single combat, and is strongly associated with the stark beauty and challenges of winter landscapes. His dwelling in Asgard is Heimdallr, meaning Udales. A fitting name, as Ullr was traditionally prized for making bows. There are intriguing hints that Ullr may have held a more prominent position in earlier periods of Norse paganism. The Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus, in his Gesta Danorum, mentions a figure named Ollyrus, a Latinized form of Ullr, who, according to one story, temporarily took Odin's place as ruler of the gods for a period of 10 years when Odin was exiled, possibly due to his transgression against Rígr or other misdeeds. This Ollyrus was depicted as a cunning magician who used a special bone inscribed with charms to cross the seas. Though eventually driven out upon Odin's return, this tale suggests that Ullr might have been a more significant deity, perhaps even a chief god in certain regions or earlier times, before Odin's cult achieved its later dominance. We then encounter Gefjun, a goddess associated with virginity and chastity. It is said that women who die as virgins become her attendants. She is also, perhaps more prominently, a goddess of ploughing, agriculture, and earthly bounty. Her most famous myth tells of the creation of the Danish island of Zealand, Sjælland. The story recounts how Gefjun, disguised as a beggar woman, approached Gylfi, the king of Sweden. When she entertained him with her stories, he granted her as much land as she could plough in one day and one night. Sjöben then journeyed to Jotunheim, the land of giants, where she had 4 sons by a giant. She transformed these 4 sons into immensely powerful oxen. Returning to Sweden, she yoked these mighty oxen to a great plough and set to work. They ploughed so deeply and with such tremendous force that a vast tract of land was detached from the Swedish mainland. Gefjun then dragged this enormous landmass out into the sea, where it became the island of Zealand. The vast hole left behind in Sweden subsequently filled with water, forming the lake known as Mälaren, or in some versions, Vänern. This etiological myth beautifully explains the origin of a key Danish island and a major Swedish lake, linking Gefjun directly to the shaping of the very land. Loki, in Lokasenna, taunts her with a story of being seduced by a young man who gave her a jewel, an accusation she does not directly refute. Then there is the enigmatic goddess Sága. Her name itself means saga, a story or history, or can be interpreted as she who sees, or the Seeing One, strongly suggesting her association with history, storytelling, prophecy, or profound wisdom. Her dwelling in Asgard is the hall Sokkvabekk, which translates as sunken bank, sunken bench, or bench of the depths. The poem Grimnismal offers a captivating image of this hall. Sokkvabekk is the fourth, where cool waves flow, and their murmur is heard around. There Odin and Sága, glad each day, drink from golden cups. This daily communion with Odin, where they drink together from golden chalices, implies a deep intellectual or spiritual companionship. They may discuss ancient wisdom, the unfolding of fates, the sagas of gods and men, or the secrets of poetry. Sága is often considered an aspect of Frigg, or another distinct goddess of wisdom, her precise role remaining somewhat mysterious, but clearly of high importance due to her close and regular association with the All-Father. The goddess Ea is renowned as the best of physicians, Betruleiknir, among the Aesir. Her name means help, mercy, or peace. She is the goddess of healing, medicine, and mercy. While listed as one of Frigg's attendants, Ea is also a significant deity in her own right. She is associated with a sacred mountain called Lífdjúpur, the Hill of Healing, or Healing Mountain. It is said that any sick or injured person who manages to climb Lífdjúpur will be healed of their afflictions, presumably through Ea's benevolent power. We now revisit Frigg's other named attendants, each a distinct goddess with a specific role and meaning, collectively representing the diverse aspects of Frigg's domain and the qualities she embodies. Fulla, or Filla, whose name means fullness or bounty, is Frigg's closest confidant. She is described as a virgin with long flowing hair and wearing a golden snood or headband. Fulla is entrusted with Frigg's eskike, small valuable casket, and is also the keeper of Frigg's footwear. Frigg shares her most secret counsels with her. It was to Fulla that Nanna from the realm of Hell sent a golden finger ring as a token of remembrance. Skjofni derives her name from Sjafni, meaning affection or love-longing. Her role is to awaken and direct people's minds towards love and affection, both emotional and sensual. Lof, whose name means praise, permission, or perhaps comforter, is a gentle and kind goddess. Her special function is to arrange unions and marriages, even those that might have been previously forbidden or faced obstacles. She has the blessing of Odin and Frigg to smooth the path for lovers. Bar, whose name means pledge, oath, or beloved, listens to the private oaths and solemn vows that men and women exchange, particularly those of love and partnership. She takes these pledges seriously and is said to punish those who break them. Vor, meaning aware, careful one, or vigilant, is a goddess of great wisdom and keen perception. She is so inquisitive and insightful that nothing can be hidden from her. A common saying noted that a woman becomes vor of that which she becomes aware. Sin, whose name means denial, refusal, or by extension, truth, as in a legal denial, has a protective and judicial function. She guards the door of Frigg's great hall, Fenrir, and denies entry to those who are not welcome or who should not pass. Furthermore, sin is invoked at legal assemblies, things, when a defendant wishes to make a formal denial or refutation of charges, to set a sin for something. Pleihulen, meaning protectress or refuge, is charged with the duty of protecting those mortals whom Frigg wishes to shield from danger or harm. Her name is also poetically used as a kenning for woman. Snotra, whose name means wise, prudent, or neat/well-mannered, is the goddess of wisdom, particularly practical wisdom, prudence, courtesy, self-discipline, and all forms of good conduct and refined manners. A person who is wise and gentle is called Snotra. Garner is Frigg's swift messenger. Her name may mean to tower over or to project. She runs errands for Frigg, travelling throughout the various worlds on her remarkable horse, Húffafnir, whose name means hoof thrower or hoof tosser. This steed is so swift that it can travel not only over land, but also through the air and across the sea. The Prose Edda recounts an encounter Gna had with some Vanir, who asked what was flying through the air, to which she replied she was not flying, but riding Hofvapnir. Next is Hermodr, called In Huprudi, the brave-minded or courageous. He is the son of Odin. Frigg is often considered his mother, making him Baldr's brother. Hermodr is renowned for his swiftness and valor, primarily demonstrated in his epic ride to Hel to ransom Baldr. After Baldr's death, when Frigg tearfully asked for a volunteer to undertake this perilous mission, it was Hermodr who bravely stepped forward. Odin lent him his own 8-legged steed, Sleipnir, for the journey. Hermodr rode for 9 nights through valleys so dark and deep that he could see nothing, until he reached the roaring river Gjoll. Spanning this river was the bridge Gjallarhorn, resounding bridge, which was described as being roofed with shining gold. The maiden Modgudru, furious battler, or battle-weary, guarded this bridge. She challenged Hermodr, asking his name and lineage, and noted that the bridge groaned more under him alone than it had under 5 troops of dead men who had passed the previous day. She also observed that he did not have the pale colour of the dead. Hermodr explained his quest to find Baldr. Modgudr confirmed that Baldr had indeed crossed the bridge and directed Hermodr on the path down and to the north that led to Hel. Hermodr continued until he arrived at the massive, heavily barred gates of Hel's realm. Dismounting, he tightened Sleipnir's girths, then remounted and spurred the great horse. Sleipnir gathered himself and leaped clear over the gates without so much as touching them. Once inside Hel's domain, Hermodr proceeded to the main hall, where he saw Baldr seated in the place of honor. Hermodr stayed the night. The next morning, he earnestly pleaded with the goddess Hel, ruler of the dead, to allow Baldr to ride back with him, conveying the immense sorrow and weeping among the Aesir. Hel, in her grim majesty, agreed to release Baldr, but only on one condition: that all things in all worlds, living and dead, must weep for him, to prove he was universally beloved. Baldr's, of course, was the condition Loki, disguised as the giantess Thok, would later sabotage. Before Hermod departed, Baldr gave him the ring Draupnir to return to Odin as a keepsake, and Nanid, Baldr's wife, sent gifts of linen to Frigg and a finger ring to Fulla. Hermod then rode back to Asgard with Hel's terms, his courageous journey a testament to his bravery and loyalty, though ultimately unable to secure Baldr's immediate return. Finally, we come to the ancient and profoundly wise being known as Mimir. His name itself means the rememberer, the wise one, or memory. His exact nature is ambiguous. He may have been a Jotun, an early god, or something else entirely, but his wisdom was unparalleled. Mimir was the guardian of Mimisbruna, Mimir's well, the well of wisdom, which was located beneath one of the 3 roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil, specifically the root that extended into Jotunheimr, the land of the frost giants. To drink from this well was to gain immense wisdom, profound insight into hidden things and knowledge of the future. It was to Mimisbruna that Odin famously journeyed in his relentless pursuit of knowledge. Knowing the immeasurable value of the well's waters, Mimir demanded a steep price for a single draught. Odin had to sacrifice one of his own eyes. Odin, for whom no price was too high for wisdom, agreed. He plucked out his eye and pledged it to Mimir, or according to some accounts, dropped it directly into the well. Only then was he allowed to drink, and in doing so he gained the profound cosmic understanding that characterized his reign. Mimir's fate took a tragic turn during the aftermath of the Aesir-Vanir War. As part of the peace treaty and hostage exchange between the 2 tribes of gods, the Aesir sent the wise and handsome god Honir and the exceptionally wise Mimir to live among the Vanir. The Vanir, in turn, sent Njordr, Freyja, and Freyja to the Aesir. The Vanir appointed Hjörnir as one of their chieftains. However, they soon discovered that while Hjörnir was imposing in appearance, he was utterly indecisive and reliant on Mimir for all counsel. Whenever Mimir was not present to advise him, Höðr would invariably respond to any question or problem with the unhelpful phrase, "Let others decide." Feeling that the Aesir had tricked them and given them the worse end of the hostage exchange, the Vanir grew angry. In their fury, they seized Mimir, decapitated him, and sent his severed head back to Odin in Asgard. Odin, devastated by the loss of such profound wisdom, refused to let Mimir's knowledge perish. He took the severed head, carefully embalmed it with special herbs to prevent it from decaying, and then chanted powerful magical spells, or Gjallarhorn, over it. Through these enchantments, Odin restored to Mimir's head the power of speech. Thereafter, Odin kept Mimir's preserved head with him, frequently consulting it for counsel, secret knowledge, and prophecies, especially in times of great crisis or when facing difficult decisions. Mimir's head continued to speak to Odin, revealing many hidden truths and offering invaluable guidance from beyond the veil of death. Mimir's story thus underscores the supreme value placed on wisdom and memory in Norse mythology and highlights Odin's unyielding quest to attain and preserve it no matter the cost. This assembly of deities, from the poets and protectors of youth to the silent avengers, tragic figures, guardians of justice, masters of winter skills, shapers of lands, keepers of history, bringers of healing, faithful attendants, brave messengers, and ancient fonts of wisdom, all contribute to the vibrant and complex world of the Aesir, each playing their part in the grand drama of Norse mythology. And that is it. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the Purple Files, click the like button, and drop a comment down below. More videos to come, and until then, thanks for watching.